Hey everyone, I'm Brian Bates, and I trust Google Maps without questioning it.
West on.
I'm Linda DeYoung, and I unironically use the Kahoot music at parties.
And this is the One-to-One podcast, brought to you by the Learning Technology Center. Well, hi everyone, and welcome back to season 3 of the One-to-One podcast. It's great to be back for another season, and Linda, welcome back for your second season as a co-host.
Yeah, it's exciting to be back as well. I thought last season talked to a lot of cool people about a lot of good topics. And, this season we have a lot in store, but today's topic is 3D printing. Now, Brian, I know that you've had experience with 3D printing, but for all of our listeners who haven't started or worked with a 3D printer before, which includes me, I have never used a 3D printer. What's the basic idea behind 3D printing?
Yeah, the basic idea is you take a roll of plastic and you melt it down enough and have a device that makes it into something different. That's a very, very simple description of it. But it's really, really cool. And I think what really got me interested, I will say that our guest today and some of the other people that are on our staff here at the LTC, as well as just seeing some things online is like that really interests me, is like the idea that you can make really cool, fun things for yourself. I think probably out of every 3 things that I print, one of them has an actual purpose. The other 2 are just fun. And I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool. Yeah. Like this little trinket or this little thing. But yeah, that's the other part of it, is that you can design and print things that have a purpose, serve a purpose, and do something and replace things. And it's really cool how once I got a 3D printer, I found myself saying, like, instead of buying something to replace something, I would say, I wonder if I can 3D print something. And normally you can go online and find files that meet your needs, and then you print it, and it costs a heck of a lot less. And it's kind of cool to just do it on your own. So, that's kind of the basic idea. That's how I got started doing it. And, it's a lot of fun. And even my 9-year-old daughter likes to do it too. So
I know the whole process kind of baffles and mystifies me. Because I remember I had a very real need, which was to have a way to track my spell slots in Dungeons and Dragons. That is a real pressing need. I was mystified that you were like, I can just 3D print up a spell slot tracker for you. And I was like, you can do that? Yes. That's wild. So yeah, I am totally agog about 3D printing, and it's just going to keep getting more and more sophisticated. Mm-hmm. And speaking of being totally agog at things 3D printing can do, it's time for news you can use. So this is our brand new segment where we look at the most recent headlines that put today's topic into perspective. Something that made one of us pause and say, that's really interesting. So did you know that we have the capability to 3D print entire homes?
Yeah, I've seen sometimes little videos will pop up where it's like they print out a concrete, or it's the little the 3D printer or big 3D printer, I guess, in this scenario, that's able to use concrete to print 3D printed homes. I've never actually seen one in person, but it always looks really cool.
I know. I've never seen one in person either. But like you said, they usually use concrete as their building material. But just recently I was, scanning the news, and I found this article about a company in Japan called LibWork, and they have figured out how to 3D print a house using soil instead of cement. So typically we use concrete, cement. They're using soil. So why do this? Well, this mix of soil, sand, lime, natural fibers, even though they're not using cement, they are still earning top resistance ratings on earthquakes in Japan, which is pretty important for Japan because they do have earthquakes. And this new version of their model home called the LibEarth Model B, it's more refined. It feels like a livable space. Like I saw pictures and the homes are actually beautiful. And compared to like the concrete models, it's cutting carbon emissions by over 50%, which is significant. So what do you think?
I think it's really cool. And it really interests me, the idea that you can take products that are found naturally on Earth, mix them together and make a house out of it. And like, the article talks about how people have been building home structures of some sort.
Yes.
For a very long time, for thousands of years, just taking mud, clay, dirt, water, whatever, all those different things, some grasses, mixing it all up and whether it's coating the outside of some wood or just building completely from that. They've been doing it for a long time, and those structures have been able to withstand a long period of time. Right. So I was really kind of surprised about the idea of the earthquake capabilities, being able to stay structurally sound during earthquakes.
Yeah, I know. And how incredible, like you said, like we've been doing this for, since the beginning of civilization. People have been creating earth-bound, earth-created homes, like the adobe structures. I actually have a friend who built an adobe home out in Arizona.
Oh, that's awesome.
Which is great. It was like a dome house. And so it's not that this is like a new concept, but the new thing about it is this added technology. Like we now have giant 3D printers that have been able to print homes. And now it's like, well, how do we infuse some of these more sustainable, long-term, ancient practices with new technology to create something that is just as effective, but more sustainable for the planet? And I thought, interestingly, the article also mentions how this approach could maybe work on Mars and how they're looking to maybe use local soil, including like Mars soil, to print structures in space. And I know we're always talking about going to Mars, but but what an interesting concept, right?
Yeah. And, you think about, like, if you've watched any of the movies or even, I know that's sci-fi and that's Hollywood's version of it, but it is very real that like the first thing you have to do is create a place that's livable on Mars. Like that would be the first thing you'd have to do once you land.
Yeah.
And the idea that you could have to potentially just transport the machinery to do the printing.
Right.
And then gather the resources there. I think that makes it any opportunity you have to make that process easier and more reasonable as far as what you have to take with you to Mars.
Yeah.
I think it would be great. But I think it's really cool that it's not only just like, what can we do here now, but like what future capabilities could this have?
Of course. So if you are interested in reading this article for yourself, if you're listening today, we'll have it linked down in the show notes. So check that out, all about 3D printing with soil. And yeah, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, keeping up with the 3D printing conversation, today we're talking with the LTC's very own Ben Sondgeroth about 3D printing and kind of following a 3D printing 101 style conversation. Everything that a school might need to know to get started, from machine brands, upkeep, managing student projects, all that kind of stuff. So let's go ahead and jump in. Ben Sondgeroth is an educational technology leader passionate about transforming classrooms with innovative digital tools. A former history teacher and director of technology, he now serves as lead regional EdTech coordinator for the Learning Technology Center, helping Illinois schools maximize digital learning. Ben has trained thousands of educators nationwide and has presented at many state and national conferences. He holds degrees from Sauk Valley Community College, the University of Indianapolis, and the University of Illinois. Dedicated to empowering educators, Ben drives progress in EdTech, equipping schools to create dynamic, tech-enhanced learning experiences. Welcome to the show, Ben.
Thank you. Happy to be here with you guys.
Ben, thanks for joining us today. We're excited to talk about 3D printing. But before we start, we like to get to know our guests a little bit with a game. We've been doing this since last season, just a little way to learn more about you. So my first question is, Ben, are you familiar with Bob the Builder?
I am, vaguely, yes.
Well, Bob the Builder, his classic thing is, can we fix it? And of course, Everyone says, yes, we can.
Sure.
And it seems like Bob the Builder can always fix it. So I would like to play a game today called Can We Make It?
Okay.
You feeling up to it?
I'm down. Let's roll.
Perfect. So here's how it works. I'm going to name kind of like a product category, and you're going to tell me whether you think it could realistically be made with a 3D printer.
Okay.
And if the answer is yes, you'll say, yes, we can make it.
Okay.
And I know that you've made quite a few 3D builds yourself. So bonus points if you can give me some examples of things that you've printed to kind of like solve this problem.
All right.
Perfect. So if you're ready to go, we can get started with our first one.
Hit me with it.
Perfect. So ways to organize your closet. Can we make it?
Yes, we can. I have an example. So this is fun. So what we're going to talk about throughout the course of like the podcast is going to be like, one of the things is like design it yourself or to print something that somebody else designed themselves, like, and then shared with the world. I'm particularly proud of this one because I actually have a design that I've made myself. And I know, Linda, you're going to talk later on about like, my photos being the show notes. This actually isn't in that photo album, but I'll try to snap a photo and add it. But I'm particularly proud of this because it is a Ben Sondgeroth original. I designed for my closet a way to hang up all of my pairs of shorts in the the closet organizer because they were all just stacked in a pile. And I wanted a quicker way to like grab workout shorts versus like golf shorts versus regular hangout shorts. So I designed a hook system, I guess, that like it latches over top of the closet organizer and then comes down and has angled out, for lack of a better term, like kind of hooks that then I can just put my belt loops through all of my shorts, or if it's an athletic pair of shorts, I just hook them on there. And then now I have all of my shorts on display at all times for me to just go up and just grab the pair that I need, put them right on, right there in my closet. We're organized. It is so much better and more efficient than previous. So
that's very handy.
And I made like a couple because like I have, nerd me, but like I have golf shorts and I have several pairs of those. So instead of making multiple like single file ones, I made one that has a V essentially and has like the brackets coming off this way and coming off straight. So I can hook them on and they hang off to the side and then they hang down. So all like 6 pairs of golf shorts that I have are on that one hook, and it's attached to the closet organizer. So
that's pretty incredible.
That is cool.
I love the Ben Sondgeroth original.
Yep.
You should get that patented for sure.
There'll be some original designs talked about here.
Yeah, I love that. Let's do another one. So party favors. Can we make it?
Yes, we can. So this is one that I 3D printed for my son Ryder's birthday 2 years ago. And this is not a Ben Sondgeroth original. I found someone that he wanted a Pokemon themed party. I found on Maker World or Thingiverse, I'm not sure which one. Somebody had created like mini Pikachus. And so I 3D printed 20 mini Pikachus. And then of course they go into the gift bag for all the kids that came, because you can't have a birthday party now without providing a gift bag for everybody. Like we're all hobbits now living, give everybody something like, Bilbo Baggins' 100th birthday or whatever it is. So, so I 3D printed a bunch of mini Pikachus and put them into the bag, to send home with all the kids. So party favors done. Yeah.
That's lovely. Well, I know that you also do some maybe appearances at Comic-Con or other kind of events. So can you create some like cosplay outfits for your next appearance? Can we make it?
Yeah, we can. I haven't brought it out into the world yet, but I definitely have 3D printed an entire suit of Mandalorian armor, and also
it's impressive.
We're up to, I believe, at last count, 11 different helmets, pretty much all from Star Wars. If you'll indulge me for just 1 second, I do have one of those.
Oh, I'll indulge.
Yeah,
I can't wait to see this.
So this is one that doesn't fit my head, but it is I do have one in display in my office. So,
cool.
So this one is a mistake because I printed it too small. So it doesn't fit my head, but, I did still paint it and, everything. So now it's on display in my office here at work, but, Yeah, the Mandalorian suit, the Illini Lorian, because I customized it with University of Illinois logos, has not made its way into the general public yet, but will be finalized at some point. It is finalized. I just need to tweak it a little bit to get it out into the world. But yeah, you can. I will say that's one thing that is fun because there are a lot of really talented artists that design these 3D models. Mm-hmm. And then allow people to either purchase the files or download them for free. So like the Mandalorian armor, somebody else had designed that, had put it out for free, and I was able to take it, resize it, scale it for me, and then spend somewhere north of 120 hours printing all of it. So
that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for playing. If you're listening and maybe on your commute, definitely come back to this video later and take a look at this helmet that Ben is showcasing. But also, I'm going to put the link to your 3D Creations photo album in the show notes. If people are interested in seeing all the things that you've 3D printed, you have like desk organization, cord management, holiday, home decor, like you have all kinds of things in there. So I'm going to put that in the show notes so people can see all the cool things that you've made and what's possible with 3D printers. So thanks so much for playing our game today, Ben.
Happy to do it, and I mean, we can even go, if you want to go Bob the Builder, but if we want to reach the kiddos, we could. It's a lot like Minecraft now. Like we're building stuff, we're crafting, but we're just doing it in the real world, So
instead of in the mines.
Instead of in the mines, we are not in the mines, but and instead of.
So would you say first we design, then we print, as opposed to first we mine, then we craft?
I think that's a good spot. Yeah, and instead of flint and steel, we're using plastic and filament.
I like that.
I don't know. We're using PETG and PLA. We can workshop that.
Yeah. I like
we'll come back to that.
Yeah.
So when we were kind of brainstorming what this episode would look like, we wanted it to kind of feel like a total overall guide for schools and teachers who may be just getting started on the 3D printing journey. Now, we know that in our episodes, it would be like hours and hours long if we were going to cover everything you needed to know. But we kind of want to make like a version of a short 3D printing 101. Mm-hmm. Cover things from like buying devices, upkeep, managing projects that students are working on. And so that's kind of where you come in. Our first question here is, let's just get started at the very beginning. You've got a principal, a tech leader, a coach, maybe it's a classroom teacher that says, I really would like to try 3D printing. What do you think is like the single most important question they should be asking themselves, their staff, their team, before they even start looking at buying a printer?
So I think it's you have to identify like right off the bat, like, budget's a huge concern. Like what printer are we going with that? And like where's the hidden cost? So I know you guys, we're going to talk about this later on, but like it's a big thing of like, you can just, buy a printer, if you wanted to. There are, dozens and dozens of them out there. But I think the biggest thing is like, who are we identifying as the teacher that is motivated to take this on, that has the ambition to learn or has done it in the past? And then what's our budget with that person, and work with that person to identify the right machine, the right, class to initiate it into, and go from there. So I think that's the thing is like, if you are the one that is like, hey, we need to bring 3D printing into our school, I think the biggest question is like, who's the right teacher to take this on? And then from there, like, what's our budget to support them? Because you can make the initial investment, but then it is a larger investment of time after that, to get it in. So I think those are kind of the two critical elements. If you've got an ambitious teacher that's like wanting to take this on and to do it, find that person first, and then figure out what the budget is going forward to be able to support them effectively. Because you can buy them a printer and that's great, but if you don't have like the budget laid out to like really truly support them, or have creative means to increase that budget with different ways that we can talk about in a little bit, that's, the downfall of 3D printing, in schools. You buy the printer and then it sits idle, in there. I would also say like one other aspect of that is not identifying just one person, but identifying like multiple people, because if that one person leaves, then nobody else knows how to do it.
Who's going to keep it going? Right?
Yeah. Your printer just sits idle afterwards. So even though you invested all those resources and that person's doing great things, they leave the district. now you're in the same spot you were before, and the printer just sits there without being used. So I think it's maybe like 2 people and then budget. And that's kind of where we start at with the beginning, is like encouraging kind of those things.
So let's say that we do have a school that wants to move forward, but they really only have the budget for like 1 printer, 2 printers. What are those key features that you think we should look for when looking at a 3D printer for schools? And maybe even what are some popular, reliable models that you would recommend? Just a note, we're not sponsored by any 3D printers. But yeah, what are your thoughts, Ben?
It's a good question, and one you can imagine I get a lot. We're not sponsored. We don't identify with brands, but also it's hard not to be a little bit biased towards brands that you've had good success with, that you've heard good feedback from, that you've talked to people about. And so there are a couple brands that kind of stand out, but as far as like printer capabilities and features, like I think cost is one. So like, how much are you going to use it for? Looking at reviews, talking to other people that have it, like what is in that budget kind of, range that you're looking for. And right now, what's really neat is that when you're looking at features, there are a couple of advanced, like Bamboo has it now, but also like Creality's released some, but there are like printers you can spend a lot of money on that have this feature. And there are printers that don't have this feature, but you can still like really print well with them. Mm-hmm. And that's the ability to print in multiple colors. So I know like Brian, I've suggested you to buy the Bamboo Lab A1. It's a great introductory printer. It has a large print bed. It can also have what's called an AMS kit, which is a multi-filament. So the ability to print in multiple colors. That's a feature that's really cool. And it's one that drives a lot of people to want to like buy a Bamboo Lab printer because you have the ability to print in multiple colors. My kind of warning with that is it's a feature that people look at and they're like, ooh, I want that because of the ability to print multiple colors. When you're in a school setting though, every time you change colors, you waste filament and it costs more money. So if you're like, that's really neat, I want to let my kids print in multiple colors. It's a cool idea, but in practice, it might not be the most efficient way to print in schools because you're going to spend more money on your filament costs. So while that's a really key feature that's neat, it's not something I think you need to like solely base your printer decision on for purchasing. So all that said, that's the one feature that I think a lot of people gravitate towards. Actual other key elements that you should be looking for, and I know a lot of people want this, are the enclosed printers. So where can we find a printer that is what's called a Core XY printer, which means it's in an enclosure and the build plate goes up and down as opposed to back and forth. So the build plate's going up and down on the Z axis, while most other printers that are not a Core XY printer are moving back and forth on the Y axis. So it's moving back and forth this way. And for this way, for podcast listeners, it's moving forwards and backwards on the print bed. And the extruder head is just moving this way, side to side on the X axis. So if you are concerned about like wanting an enclosed printer, because when they're enclosed, that feature makes sure that students aren't reaching their hands in and touching the print bed and touching the extruder head and things like that, and the hot end, where they could potentially burn themselves. Those printers also tend to be a little faster as well, which is nice because that's another feature, like you're gaining speed. Mm-hmm. And so that's some of the kind of those key features. Now, I'm also here to say that lots of people are buying non-enclosed printers and not having issue with kids reaching their hands in and burning themselves, or anything like that. Like it is just one of those things that's kind of a personal decision. Do you want to have an enclosed printer or not? If we would have had this podcast, last year, I would have said, anytime you're looking at an enclosed printer, you're increasing your cost exponentially, because there aren't very many cheap ones on the market right now. That has now since changed. So when we get into the brand discussion here, Bamboo Lab is kind of one of the go-to printers right now. They are very popular. They're very good. They're very reliable. They are very cost effective for what you get. So I really like Bamboo. I have a Bamboo Lab A1. It is like around $500-ish, depending on what sale you can catch it on. And they also level all the way up to a couple of other models like the Bamboo Lab P1S and the Bamboo Lab X1C, which is a carbon printer. And so those get into the closer to $700 to $1,500 range. But those two printers are enclosed. Mm-hmm. So when you're talking about brands, Bamboo is very, very good. The one that we are kind of also starting to push towards, because it's a little bit more budget friendly, is Elegoo. So Elegoo has entered the space and entered it very well. They've been around for quite some time, but their newest models are very cost effective and very good. And so when we're talking about like having I think Eric Santos coined the term balling on a budget. We're looking at the Elegoo brand printers because they offer a wide range of printers and they're very affordable. And their newest model, the Elegoo Centauri carbon printer, is a Core XY enclosed printer, and it is only $300 versus the cheapest enclosed printer from Bamboo you're going to pay around $800 to $900 for. And the Elegoo Centauri carbon printer that's only $300 is very close in spec for spec with the Bamboo Lab X1C printer that runs between $1,400 and $1,600. So for, a fifth of the cost, you can buy one Elegoo X1 or Elegoo Centauri and then be awesome with printing advanced, like it can print in carbon fiber. It can print in these really, really difficult filaments to print in that are advanced, for only $300, which is pretty cool. And it's enclosed. The key difference between the two is that the Bamboo X1C can print in multiple colors, and the Elegoo, as of today, when we're recording this on August 14th, cannot, but will be able to in the coming months. They are releasing an AMS kit for it, a multi-filament kit for it this quarter, allegedly.
Nice. Little sneak peek for
listeners. That's exciting. Awesome. Yeah, and it with everything else as far as how budget friendly Elegoo is, I'm excited because I think that means that the kit is going to be pretty budget friendly as well. So I would guess you're going to be able to get an enclosed Core XY carbon fiber capable printer with an AMS kit. I would bet for under $500, would be my guess, which is going to be exciting. So I own one of those. That's one that I bought with my own personal dollars too. Like I was so enthralled with like the capabilities, potential of it. It's going to be pretty neat. So I think if we're going to drill all that down, short story long there, what you're looking for is identify if you want an open air printer or if you want an enclosed printer, and then look at those models and those options. Brand wise, you also have what you want to consider as you're looking through those. If you're not even sure if you want to go with an Elegoo or a Bamboo, you want to look for a printer that is capable of printing multiple brands of filament and not just one. And so there are printers out there in the space that rely only on a certain particular filament type, and it's one that they sell. So it's a completely closed shop.
Yeah.
And that limits you in your ability to go out and find other filaments, colors, types, and costs there. So the thing that I like about the Elegoo printers and the Bamboo printers is that I can go on Amazon and I can pretty much purchase multiple different brands of filament and use them with my printer. So that expands my color arsenal, that expands my material arsenal and those types of things. So that's really fun. So those are some of the kind of the core features that you're looking for, like enclosed, not enclosed, multiple filaments able to be used, filament types. What are you printing for? That type of thing. So, there's a lot in there to unpack, but the budget is always at center of it. And right now, if you're really looking to ball on a budget, like the Elegoo printers are hard to beat, for my money. At least that's what I've spent my own money on them, so I can speak to that. So, yeah.
So we've talked quite a bit about filament being something that it's a necessity. Obviously, it's the medium that you print with. But continuing that little budget conversation here, there are other hidden costs that someone that is getting into 3D printing might not consider. So what are some things that you consider to be absolute necessary accessories with the 3D printer beyond filament that maybe a school might not think about off the top or might forget to budget for that you see is really crucial to have?
So I'll actually start with the filament cost because I think that is an important step to I've brushed on it, but I haven't addressed it. And one of those things with filament, as far as the cost wise, is the more you buy, often the better the deal you get. And so if you are looking to buy a lot of filament for your classroom, look at the bulk options and also color wise, identify what projects your kids are going to be doing and see if you can kind of just pencil them all into like one type of color, right? So like, we're only going to print this in black. We're only going to print this in white. We're going to print all these in our school colors. Like, so we're going to buy a bunch of our school colors because often the more rolls you get, the better the discount is. And then also the other thing that I get a lot with the filament cost is like, what's the average typical cost? Well, you can buy a brand. I like the Overture brand. It's a nice budget friendly brand. You can get on Amazon and you can buy a roll of black or white PETG or PLA filament for around like $12 a roll. It's usually always on sale. But it also can go up to $15 or $16. You can also then buy fancy colors, that are closer to like $20 a roll. And so you get a kilogram per roll, is what's typical. And that goes a long way, right? Depending on what type of print you're doing. So as far as like cost wise goes, like that's just something to keep in mind and to consider. Like, don't like buy a roll of filament for like a one-off project that your students are going to do or one student's going to do, because then you're going to spend 15 or 20 bucks and then have that roll sitting there and it could potentially go bad. So just something like in the filament and the hidden costs of filament, like sticking to projects that can be printed in really any color, but maybe those generic colors is often like good practice. Now, beyond that, there are some things you want to like consider and make sure you buy. And, you're going to look at different things like, so it sounds really kind of silly to do, but the thing that is important is that and I'm looking in my drawer here because I have a couple of things in here. I won't dig, but angled flush cutters are really important. They're little snippers, and you're going to be cutting a lot of filament. You're going to be cutting supports off. You're going to be looking to snip different stuff. So like, there's some essential tools, like having cutters is really important. Needle nose pliers, also important to help pry off different aspects of a print, supports. Tweezers to an extent can be considered like essential. I don't necessarily use them a lot, but I have found like having a good set of precision tweezers is really good and helpful. But I think one of the things that is really, really important there too is making sure that you buy a good microfiber cloth and then isopropyl alcohol. So I do actually have that right here because I have a printer you can see maybe behind me, but like a good bottle of this, because this is what you're cleaning your print bed with. And so you want to make sure one of the key elements of getting a good print and making sure your print adheres to the build plate is making sure it's clean. And so cleaning it off with a microfiber cloth and isopropyl alcohol is really an important step in this. So flush cutters, needle nose pliers, tweezers, isopropyl alcohol, microfiber cloth. And then the last one is a good scraper. So you need a scraper tool to be able to pry things off of the print bed, and to help scrape any sort of filament that is adhered to it. And that can be a really important element. Like, you want to make sure you have a good scraper, as well. Now, where do you get all these things? You can find 3D print kits on Amazon for anywhere between $15 and $50 that have all the tools that you need. But for like essential tools, I think those are kind of my mainstays there. Is like, you want to make sure you have those cutters, pliers, isopropyl alcohol, needle nose plier, or microfiber cloth, scraper, right? Like, those types of things are really important. The last thing I'll say that I think is really, really important is that you have a set of digital calipers as well. And so that's a cost you don't want to skip out on. And so when you buy these digital calipers, what you're doing is you're purchasing a measuring device. And when we get into like what you're doing with your kids, we can do a whole part 2 on that. Like, designing is so important with 3D printing, and having kids design for a purpose and make for a purpose. And if what they're going to learn in that process is that their measurements need to be very precise, or what they're building won't accomplish what they want it to accomplish. So buying a set of, or a digital caliper tool will allow them to learn precise units of measure, which then can cross-curricular into math and physics and science and industrial arts and all of those other subjects, right? And so that is a really essential part. That's not something that would be like, hey, I need this to print something I found off Maker World, but it is something like, hey, we're going to design for a solution to a problem. We need to measure it effectively. So those are kind of my big essential items there, that students probably, or that schools are probably not thinking of. But again, one of the cool things is Amazon's got kits that you can buy for 20 to 30 bucks, 15 bucks in some cases, that have all of this stuff in it. And they're really good. I've bought a couple myself. So that's kind of my go-to stuff as far as filament and then extra tools and essential items.
Nice. Well, speaking of, talking about students designing work, we've kind of gotten into like the nuts and bolts of like the physical setup and what you might need, but you also need software to be able to design actual 3D print, builds in.
Mm-hmm.
So that can be, I think, a little bit intimidating. Could you maybe demystify what the essential software looks like, what's needed for that, maybe even what is a great free user-friendly program that students can use to get into and start designing right away? Because that is an essential part of the process.
Totally. And so what we're looking at there is that we're looking at the 3D print process as a whole. And in order to be a successful 3D print operation, you have kind of a couple of key elements that you work through. First off is design. So what are we taking kids into to actually get them to design objects to then print? The free version that is the kind of the go-to easy one to get everybody started is Tinkercad. So Tinkercad is through Autodesk, which has the kind of go-to industry standard with what's called Fusion 360, which is a large program that is not super easy to get to know and understand, but that's a CAD software. Tinkercad is the kind of mini version, light version of that you can run on any Chromebook, any Chrome web browser, and you can design anything you want to a point, right? Like it's limited in that it's not an advanced CAD program, but it's really good. So you would design in Tinkercad the solution that you're looking to print. From there, you can export that file out as what's called an STL file. And that file you will need to bring into another program called a slicing program or a slicer. This is where we get interesting because the slicers have to be run on a PC or a Mac. They don't run on a Chromebook. So as a teacher, you gatekeep what goes to your 3D printer because you're the one that has to have the slicer on your machine, or you have to have a dedicated PC or MacBook in your room that has the slicer on it. So your kids can design on their Chromebooks, but ultimately it has to go to a PC or a MacBook for what's called a slicer program in order to then send to the printer. Now, those solutions are all free. Okay. So you don't have to, some of the design software can be expensive. If you're going into Fusion 360, like you may have to pay for that. It is free for educators though. So that's cool.
Cool.
But then like if they go out into the real world, they might have to pay for it on their own if you have a student that wants to do this, independently. But Tinkercad is always free. Okay. So they can design for free in Tinkercad. Then you have to find the slicer software that works with the machine that you have. So there are multiple slicers out there. Cura is one. Bamboo Studio has their own, Bamboo has their own. It's called Bamboo Studio. Elegoo now has their own. It's called Elegoo Slicer. And then there's also one that is an open source slicer called Orca Slicer that works across multiple printers. And then there's another brand of printer that I should have mentioned back when we were talking about printers called Prusa. They're kind of a gold standard printer right now. Like they're expensive, but they're really, really good. So if you have the budget, like that is a really high quality printer. And you probably guessed it. You're going to slice with Prusa slicer to send to a Prusa. So, you want to pick, they're all the same though. That's kind of the thing is like, especially Orca, Prusa, Elegoo, and Bamboo. You open any of those up. The only thing that's really different is the colors are different. Like that's it. Everything else is the same. Like you can get to everything else, like pretty much. They're all clones of each other. So you kind of want to find what brand of printer you have and then use the slicer for that. So if you have an Elegoo, use Elegoo slicer. If you have a Bamboo, use Bamboo slicer. And that's kind of the way you go. So you take the print, you design it in Tinkercad, you export it into the slicer, you slice it in there, which means it like basically identifies how it's going to print. And then from there, you send it over to your 3D printer to then create your creation and turn it into real life. So that's kind of the step-by-step process. But it is like, if we can summarize all of that, you want to basically use the slicing software for the brand of printer that you have. And if you have multiple brands of printers, you're probably going to use a couple of different slicers then. Like, you can use Orca Slicer to push to Bamboo and Elegoo, but it's a bit strange for some people to set up. So kind of the go-to is like, I have 2 slicers going on my machine at all times. So that's the process.
So that leads us to our next kind of stage in this process of getting involved and getting started with 3D printing. We've got our printer, we've selected it, we've got our budget, we've got the tools we need, we've got the software we need. Now we've got a classroom full of kids that are just dying to print something. So how do you effectively manage like that print queue that lines up of kids wanting to print things, their projects as they're getting ready to do it? The print etiquette, the necessary training that you might have to give the students, because you yourself as an educator may have had to learn how to use the 3D printer, but now how do you handle a classroom full of students that are just dying to use that printer?
Yeah, it's a big question, and one that a lot of people struggle with because, you only have so much space on the print bed to print. So one of the strategies, and just full disclosure, like I have not 3D printed with a class. So all of my ideas and theories are being tested by other teachers that come to my workshops. And, I've leaned on Eric Santos, who has done some 3D printing with his kids in a past job, and, kind of brainstorming ways that we can make this happen. So one of the things that I suggest right off the bat is if you want to print the most items at once. So like you have, 15 kids and they're all designing something. You want to limit the size of the print that the students are able to design. So inside of Tinkercad, you can actually set up what's called your bed space. And I have it defaulted to be the bed size of my printer. So when I'm designing something in Tinkercad, if I get too big with it, I know I can't print it because it's outside the size of the build plate that my printer has. So one of the strategies we worked on with teachers is kind of take your build plate and divide it up into either quadrants and then figure out how big each quadrant is. And then the students in Tinkercad have to adjust their build plate to be only the size of that quadrant on your printer. So then they design something, it can't exceed that square. And then in theory, they can send you their project and you can then print 4 at a time as opposed to just 1. So that's kind of one of those strategies. It's like kind of divide up your build plate and then tell them they have to set up their Tinkercad design in that size. So that way you can print multiples. The other thing is like making sure that if you're printing something in mass, you want to make sure that it's kind of the same thing. So whether that's a bag tag, a bookmark, a keychain, a small, something, like everybody's is in the same kind of design principles or template. Because if I'm like, so I'm designing a bag tag, but Linda, you're designing like a little Lego guy, and Brian's designing, a replica of the Washington Monument. Like,
that sounds right.
Yeah, like sure. And so if you put all those on the build plate, like they're just like it's fine. It could do that. It just would be like different print lengths based on like those 3 different models that are printing all at once. And, there's more of a chance that something could go wrong with like Linda's Lego guy, and that then we have to stop the print. And then Brian's Washington Monument never gets printed because something gets screwed up with Linda's print, which then causes Brian's print to go bad. If we're all printing bag tags and one goes wrong, at least it's all like at the same spot, right? So that's something to consider, like dividing up your Tinkercad project into those smaller sections to then print in mass can be really a helpful strategy to be able to do that. But then also you are the gatekeeper as the teacher. So like I said, unless you have a student that's like gung-ho and knows what they're doing in the slicer, which is something you should get to, like hopefully you ascend to the point where kids can understand how to slice. But at the start, you are the one that is slicing the files to see if Linda's minifig is even printable. Like you did a really good job designing that, but there are so many overhangs. There's so much support that needs to be put into this design. Like we can't print that right now. Like that's going to cost too much money to do. So let's go back into Tinkercad, simplify it, and then bring it back in. But that is you as a teacher controlling what gets put into the printer, to be able to design. So that's a way that like the gatekeeping can really help, like with the design process. I get to see everything before it goes in, and I can detect where it might fail and have you fix it before we actually print it and have it fail. So those are some of those strategies, right? So we want to make sure that you are the one that is understanding how to prevent failure, by being the one that does that. So that's my thing. And then also buying a printer that has a huge print bed can be really helpful with that. So like I would say, if we go back to the printer conversation, like the Elegoo Neptune 4 Plus has a monster print bed on it. It's big. The 4 Max has an even bigger print bed. So you could print, like you have the 25 questions, like if you get the Max, you're going to have a lot of room on your table being taken up by it, but you could print a lot of stuff at once. So that's kind of where I fall on that question.
So kind of nearing like the end of, we've gone from like you open the box, first you're deciding what printer you're going to get. You open the box, you start printing with students. Let's pretend a year has passed. You've been working with students. You've been using the printer. And at this point, my question would be like, what are those maintenance tasks that a teacher should be doing or a school should be doing to keep that machine running smoothly far into the future, extend its life? Because in the best case scenario, the printer's being used heavily, like it's being used to print and print and print with students. It's not sitting idle. So what are those maintenance tasks?
Keeping it clean. So like that's big. It's like, the cleaner your print beds, the better. Cause that's going to prevent blobs from happening as best it can. It's still going to happen, but at least that helps. Actually, one of the best maintenance features you can do doesn't have anything to do with the printer itself, but it has to do with keeping your filament dry. If you don't keep your filament dry and you put wet filament into the printer, and so the filament absorbs humidity. And it's a little bit backwards because when it absorbs humidity, it actually becomes brittle. So wet filament is actually breakable versus you would think wet filament would be maybe like spongy, right? Mm-hmm. And so when your filament absorbs that humidity, it becomes dry. And then when it goes to print, it can gum up your printer. It can snap off easier and it gets stuck and clogged. So your best maintenance tip might actually be to make sure your filament is well kept. So keeping it in Ziploc bags, keeping it in dry sealed gasket crates. Mm-hmm. Don't just leave it out on a shelf, for 6 months and then try to put it into your printer. Invest in a filament dryer, which are around like $40. And then you can put it in and essentially acts as a dehumidifier and sucks the moisture out before you then go in. So that in and of itself can take care of a lot of maintenance issues by just using the correct filament and dry filament. Other than that, it's pretty simple. Like they're not really that advanced of machines. Like keep your bearings greased up. Like make sure you're applying lubricant when it tells you to apply lubricant. Cause a lot of them tell you like, hey, maintenance is due, like put lubricant on. Simple stuff like that, like paying attention to the owner's manual and what it says to do for regular maintenance. But they're not really a complex device. So it's really just a matter of like keeping them clean. Don't keep filament in the extruder for long periods of time because it could dry out, crack, break. So always unload your filament out of the extruder head. And that's pretty much it. They're not a crazy machine to try and take care of like some people might think they are.
Yeah, that seems pretty, like, not simple, but a lot less complex than I thought it would be. Mm-hmm. I thought it was like, take it all apart and make sure you scrub it down, like it seems pretty simple.
Yeah, just keep your build plate clean, lube up your gears and that's pretty much it. So
it sounds like preventative maintenance with like keeping the filament dry and not, that's probably more important than just actual afterward, maintaining it after the point.
It really is. Yeah. Yep.
Nice. Well, we like to end every episode with a challenge, and this is where we ask our guest to think through a scenario that a real life teacher might be having. So we have a scenario that's very likely to happen in a classroom, and we read you this scenario and then give you like 30 seconds or so to think about it. And then you can provide kind of, what do you think? What would you tell this teacher? How would you fix this problem? So are you down to kind of do our challenge today, Ben?
Hit me with it. I'm ready.
Perfect. So here's our scenario. Imagine that Mrs. Evans is using her school's new 3D printer for a science project. She listened to this episode. She bought the printer. And her student, Sarah, spent all day designing a complex cell model, and it's a huge source of pride for Sarah. They hit print, and they come back the next morning to check on it. Well, the good news is the printer ran. The bad news is it's a spectacular failure. The filament has completely stopped extruding halfway through the print. The print head's just moving in the air. The lower half of the cell model is perfect on the print bed, but the top half is just this like spaghetti, stringy, tangled mess. Sarah, of course, is heartbroken. So what do you think is the very first thing that Mrs. Evans should do? What's her step-by-step game plan when a 3D print fails? Because let's face it, it's going to happen. So I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to think through that. And for our listeners at home, think about what you would do. And we'll see you after the break. All right, Ben, we are back. What do you think?
Welcome to 3D printing, because it's gonna happen all the time. And sometimes the best thing you can do is just be like, I don't know what happened. Let's try it again. But if we are being in the shoes of one Miss Evans here, the first step is to console dear Sarah and say, welcome to 3D printing. I'm sorry. That's a bummer, but guess what? We get to try it again. And so the first step is like clean it all up. Like it stinks. There's going to be filament everywhere. Like welcome to, you've earned, as Santos likes to say, like you've earned your 3D printing badge of spaghettiing, because it's going to happen. I have gotten Snapchats from my wife who has walked downstairs and just be like, is this the way it's supposed to look? And there's just spaghetti all over the floor in the basement. I'm like, nope, please hit stop as it's going. So it is something that's going to happen to you, at all times. Now, here's why it happened. More than likely is that the design of the print was, in most cases, the design of the print was not correct. Mm-hmm. So you're going to want to go back into your slicer and you're going to look at where that print failed at. And so in a lot of cases, when we get the spaghettiing, and I shouldn't say, and I would say in most cases, when you get the spaghettiing, is you probably didn't add supports to the right spot. And so when it does that, it has started to print on air. So there might have been an overhang where there should have been a support printed that then you can snap off at a later time to then print on that spot in order to, have the print go higher. So there might have been something that got caught in there that you didn't think when Sarah designed this print. And so one of the ways that you can try to see that is like, even if you don't think that the print needs supports, is in the slicer, you can check the box, apply supports, and then see where it thinks it's unable to print. So if you have a model where you're like, nah, this is fine, like just always check the box just to see if it says like, hey, you need this here, right? And that might be solving the solution. If that does have a support needed there and you're like, I don't want a support there, then you have to go back into the redesign process. So go back into Tinkercad, redesign the model, change the way it's looking, and then you can print it after the fact. Now, the other situation that could have happened, if we're doing this on the fly here, is that the model could have come off from the print bed and then it moved and shifted, and therefore causing it to print on air because the model came detached from the print bed. So it looks like the first, several layers printed great, but then it got detached and it happened to print in spaghetti. This may have just happened to me 3 days ago because I was printing something. I was trying to print golf shaft extenders for my son Ryder's golf clubs because he's grown in so much that his clubs are too short. So I can print in plastic extensions to go into the butt of the shaft, regrip it, so then they're longer for him to use. I was printing a very cylinder style thing that was going to be 2.5 inches tall. I did not put what's called a brim on the bottom of it the first time, and it printed too high. And as it's going back and forth, it knocked over the tower or the shaft extender that it was building, and therefore was starting to just print on air because it knocked over the thing it was supposed to be printing.
Makes sense.
So in my redesign or my slicer thing, instead of adding supports, I added what's called a brim that just provides an additional layer of adhesion to the bed. So there's a couple of different things that could have happened in that situation there. And it's often going to revolve around like bed adhesion or printing something that needed supports and you didn't support it in the appropriate way. So those are kind of the two troubleshooting things. And also it's going to happen. And sometimes you're like, I don't know what happened there, but it's also a case of like monitoring the print too. Like I am one that I leave prints going all the time, and I've come downstairs but also like had the blob happen where like it printed up and it adhered to the hot end. And then I have to tear the whole printer apart and fix it and replace the hot end, which really stinks. But it's something that everybody's going to have to do at some point. So, those are kind of the main scenarios. You know, it's probably one of those two things: poor bed adhesion or, supports not being enabled where they need it to be.
Well, you've completed our challenge. I think that's great advice, right? Yeah. Because if I was in Sarah's shoes, I'd be pretty devastated. But I mean, that's what learning's all about, right? Is failing, making mistakes, and then course correcting, and trying again. So
absolutely. Yeah, it is. I mean, that's the fun part of it too. It's the frustrating part when you're first learning. Mm-hmm. It's the part that's still frustrating when you're an advanced printer, but it's also kind of the fun is, having something fail and then fix it. And then trying to redesign it and having that challenge. I find it very appealing. That's my main kind of thing that I really like about the 3D printing world is print, until you get something that actually works. And then that's the gratifying part of it. That's the payoff.
Well, Ben, thank you so much for joining us today to share about your 3D printing expertise. And where could people go to find out more about you or more about your 3D printing or the work that you do with the LTC?
So all of our events are on the LTC's website, as I'm sure your listeners have heard before. And we're doing, at least if you're in Illinois and you're in the northern part of the state, we're doing I think I've got 2 or 3 on the calendar already for this upcoming year. But the RATCs across the state are doing 3D print work too. So you can find your local RATC. They're going to probably be doing an event or 2 this year too that you can follow up on. So that's fun. Now, as far as finding my stuff, I don't share as much as I should. I feel like I need to be better at that. I'm probably going to start my own Instagram account here in a little bit just to share the 3D printing fun that we do. But for right now, I print a lot and share a lot on just my personal Instagram page. So you're going to get a lot of stuff that's not 3D printing, but you're going to just get a life and insight into the world of Ben there too, which is an interesting place, I think. So Ben Sondgeroth, I see Linda, you put it up on the screen there. And it's going to be the life and times of what a dad who likes to do too many things does on a daily basis. And might overshare from time to time on the story because his kids are really cute and funny. So, but I also share a lot of the 3D print fun. So when I do something cool, when I 3D print it, I often post it on there. So, and if there's going to ever be a 3D print page, it would be announced on that too. So we'll see. Need to figure that out. So, yeah.
Beautiful.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today and sitting down with us one-to-one.
Happy to do it.
As you're kicking off your school year, start planning your professional learning with the LTC. Celebrate the 30th anniversary of IETC, where we're kicking it back to the 90s. You can find more information and register at illinois.org/IETC.
And since you're listening to a podcast, is virtual learning more your style? We've got a packed fall full of webinars and workshops coming up. You can check out all of our virtual offerings at ltc.site/webinars.
And of course, we have a whole season ahead of us, so consider subscribing or following the One-to-One podcast on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Well, Linda, we'll see you next time where we'll be sitting down one-to-one.